Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today's topic is on ethics and environment, which is one of the topic that I present to my students on business ethics. I'll start with the verse from Surah Al-Rum, Surah 30, verse 41. Corruption, fasad, has appeared on land and in the sea as an outcome of what men's hands have wrought. And so he will let them taste the evil of some of their doings so that they might return to the right path. So the commentary by Muhammad Asad, thus the growing corruption and destruction of our natural environment, so awesomely, if yes yet only partially demonstrated in our time, is here predicted as an outcome of what men's hands have wrought. That is of that self-destructive, because utterly materialistic inventiveness and frenzied activity which now threatens mankind with previously unmanageable ecological disasters and unbridled pollution of land, air and water through industrial and urban waste, a progressive poisoning of plant and marine life, all manner of genetic malformations in men's own bodies through an ever-widening use of drugs and seemingly beneficial chemicals, and the gradual extinction of many animal species essential to human well-being. To all this may be added the rapid deterioration and decomposition of man's social life, the all-round increase in sexual perversion, crime and violence, with perhaps nuclear annihilation as the ultimate stage, all of which is in the last resort an outcome of man's oblivion of God and hence of all absolute moral values and their supersession by the belief that material progress is the only thing that matters. Right? So that's Surah Al-Rum, verse 41, and the commentary by Muhammad Asad. An introduction to what this topic is. Industrialization, modernism has provided us with material well-being and prosperity. It caused environmental threats to ourselves and future generations. Pollution, rapidly depleting natural resources are outcomes of industrialization, what man's hands has wrought. Global warming, pollution, and depletion of natural resources are the three main threats of today's environment. So we have global warming, right? So nowadays, the world feels hotter, right, due to rising water temperatures of nations across the globe, despite climatic differences. Then there's pollution, undesirable, unintended contamination of the environment by the manufacture or use of commodities. So this include air pollution, water pollution, land pollution, sound pollution are other forms, and light pollution. Resource depletion refers to the consumption of finite or scarce resources. So these are the new threats and challenges in the 21st century. So we'll go through it one by one. Population growth. The world population is growing at an unusually rapid pace, right? 1950, the world population was 2.5 billion, 6.1 billion. Now it's about 7 billion or 8 billion, right? So 150% increase over a period of only 50 years. Birth rates have fallen, right? But the world population is projected to grow by 9.3 billion by 2050. The population increases, but the Earth's natural system does not. The amount of fresh water produced by the hydrological cycle still remains the same. There is a strong likelihood that there will be a shortage of natural resources for human consumption in the future. Rising temperatures, global warming due to rising atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide. In 1969 to 98, average global temperature was 13.9 Celsius. It increased to 14.43 Celsius in 1996 till 98. Carbon dioxide concentrations doubled pre-industrial levels in this century as projected. Global temperature is likely to rise by at least 1 degree Celsius. Sea levels projected to rise from a minimum of 17 centimeter to as much as by 1 meter by the year 2100. So you will see some cities sinking, Venice is sinking, and there are some cities like Penang that will be sinking in the future. This will alter every ecosystem on Earth. Coral reefs are already affected with the rising sea surface temperatures. We have the Kyoto Protocol in 1997. That was one of the COP in 1997. Is an international agreement linked to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change aimed at fighting global warming. It is an international environmental treaty with the goal of achieving stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system, right? So 191 states have signed and ratified the protocol, including Malaysia. Falling water tables, shrinking cropland, and collapsing fisheries, right? So water tables falling refers to the problem of insufficient water supply to feed the growing population adequately over the next few decades. There's a worldwide shrinkage in cropland because large amount of cropland has been converted to industrial or residential land. There's the problem of leveling off oceanic fish to catch. We're catching more fish due to the availability of more efficient trawlers and modern fishing techniques. Fish become an export commodity rather than domestic consumption. So certain species of fish, according to the World Wildlife Fund, has become extinct, right, due to overfishing. So these three trends of insufficient water supply, cropland converted to industrial residential land, and overfishing makes it difficult to keep the growth demand for food and suggests that we will face acute food shortage in the near future. Shrinking forests and loss of animal species. Forest area has shrunk substantially with the loss occurring in developing countries. So you have timber, construction, manufacturing, even pharmaceutical industries excessively exploit forests to fulfill the needs of domestic and foreign habitats. So habitats and plants are depleting as they are unable to survive, resulting in extinction of plants and animal species. So you can see the front page of the Malaysian The Star on Thursday, 3rd July, losing our green legacy. The plant life in Malaysia is under threat, facing dangers ranging from deforestation to poaching. Some 600 species of plants in the state of Sabah in Malaysia alone are at risk of extinction, and conservationists are calling for more research and local expertise to safeguard the country's botanical diversity. So this is talking about loss of plant species in the state of Sabah. The plant kingdom isn't doing so well, with at least 600 species facing extinction in the state of Sabah in Malaysia alone, right? These species, which comprise flowering plants and trees, are under threat due to poaching and other human activities, according to the Sabah Forestry Department. Besides pitcher plants, the other types of flora facing threats are trees and flowers. So, timber being logged, harvested, while high horticultural demand for exotic plants like pitcher plants and orchids means that they are poached in the wild and sold in the black market, right? So that's one of the threats in this 21st century. The issue of sustainability and sustainable development. Sustainability was certainly first considered as a preeminently ecological concept, prescribing rules and principles for the usage of natural resources in such a way which allows future generations to survive on this planet. To capture a broader understanding of the concept, Crane and Martin define sustainability as long-term maintenance of systems according to environmental, economic, and social considerations. So human sustainability has implied integration of economic, social and environmental spheres to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, right? So it's about meeting our current needs and making sure that our great grandchildren needs will be met. Three classes of sustainability. Environmental sustainability talks about environmental reporting, eco-design, environmental management systems, executive commitment to environmental issues. Economic sustainability talks about strategic planning, quality and knowledge management, supply chain management, corporate governance mechanisms. So last week we talked about corporate governance. And social sustainability talks about employment policies, management development, stakeholder dialogue, affirmative action, and human rights policies and anti-corruption policies. Sustainable development, on the other hand, is a pattern of resource use that aims to meet human needs while preserving the environment, so that these needs can be met not only in the present but also for future generations. So this concept of sustainability and sustainable development is consistent with Islamic ethics, which emphasize on human roles and responsibilities in ensuring the progression of the earth. Next, we talk about renewable and non-renewable resources. There are two types of energy resources, renewable and non-renewable, right? So renewable can be regenerated or replenished once finished. So this includes biomass, water, geothermal, wind, solar, which is part of the green energy, right? Resources considered non-renewable, their quantities are limited or they cannot be replaced as fast as they can be used up. Non-renewable resources include petroleum, coal, natural gas, and nuclear, right? Decisions on types of resources to invest in will not only have long-term effect on the environment, but also on whether future generations will be able to reap these benefits. Sustainable development, is it an oxymoron? The term oxymoron means contradiction, right? As nations continue to promote economic growth, industrialization is inevitable, natural resources become exploited. So the term sustainable development is a contradiction of sorts. This suggests that there are not or there cannot be sustainable development when humans are supposed to use the natural resources for survival. The beginning of globalization in mid-1990s further challenged sustainable development. Expansion of multinational corporations to tap unexploited resources in developing nations with government support to sustain economic growth seems to support this notion. Free market arguments. Advocates of the free market will not share the views of many environmentalists on the topics of sustainability. According to Desjardins, resources are infinite and should not be viewed as material objects but as a means to an end, right? So that's the free market argument. On preservation of environmentally sensitive areas, they argue that preservation will be a waste since it would represent resources that are employed so as to yield less than they might yield in human satisfaction. From a strict free market view, preserving biological diversity is an appropriate policy goal only if doing so satisfies more consumer preferences than the alternative. If people are willing to pay to preserve species, then doing so is a legitimate business goal. So I talk over with my students about where do we preserve species in zoos, right? Animals. So it becomes a legitimate business goal to preserve animal species, having in them in zoos. Free market arguments and their impact on the environment. So we face environmental pollution, groundwater contamination, depletion, soil erosion. So these are forms of market failure or called negative externalities, creating inconvenience to society and threat to quality of life of humans. So due to this condition faced by third parties external to the economic exchange, and since the market fails to value price for social free goods, water and air, intervention through legislative policies are critical to prevent further harm to humans. So we have seen some steps taken by the government to control negative externalities, impose regulations for firms to comply with the environmental acts, impose taxes on the producers or manufacturers, for example, having pollution taxes, impose penalties for non-compliance, introduction of funds of public expenditure to improve the environment, centralization of manufacturing activities. So we have centralized areas for manufacturing. So we have example of Malaysian environmental laws, water and river protection statutes, and the agencies to comply these laws on water and river protection, on land and soil, on water services, and also propose compulsory rainwater harvesting. Scientific evidence shows that humanity is living unsustainably. UN report states that returning human use of natural resources to within sustainable limits will require a major collective effort, right? UN regards the interdependent and mutually reinforcing pillars of sustainable development as economic development, social development, and environmental protection. So this is like the ESG, right? Environmental, social, and governance. Sustainable development, therefore, should not only focus on environmental protection but also towards social economy. All the key players in the macro economy have to work together to address this issue. Sustainable consumption. So this includes various aspects of environmental, social equity, and moral concerns. It's not only about buying ecological goods, buying recycled products, for example, recycled paper, and so on, and protecting the environment. One has to think about personal health and lifestyle choices, such as inappropriate eating habits, consumption of damaging and addictive substances, stressful lifestyle, etc. Thus, consumption patterns affect health, lifestyle, financial and social environment, as well as the global environment and the natural resources available. Sustainable consumption is the only way to ensure a proper balance of all these issues in the long term. So sustainable consumption is the way forward. But what are the barriers towards sustainable consumption? So there's willingness to act. Are you willing to act towards sustainable consumption? Some people state that they simply do not want to change their behavior or do not have time to do so. They're just too lazy or do not care about the environment. Lack of awareness and information. Often daily activities are carried out on a low level of consciousness. A lot of the environmentally significant behavioral patterns are a matter of habit and daily routine, thus they are not even considered, right? Habits and routines. General routine often prevents consumers from implementing changes in their consumption patterns. Their habits and routines are closely related to their priorities. Thus, funds and financial resources are often valued higher than sustainable consumption. Convenience, right? Subjective, but not absolute. Sometimes consumers base their opinions about the inconvenience of sustainable consumption on the assumption and without any real experience or actual information. Lack of access to facilities, right? People not very likely to undertake activities as recycling if there are no facilities provided for this purpose, right? Nowadays we see recycle bins quite a lot. Similar to convenience, cost is a subjective concept, and sustainable products are often assumed to be too expensive, with the best example being organic food, right? So if you go to the supermarket to find where the organic food is, there's a special shelf for organic food, for example, and you can see, compare the prices, right? And they are more expensive. Another related problem with cost is that it also hides other barriers such as inconvenience and habit. Other barriers towards sustainable consumption: psychological effects. People commonly see environmental problems as too distinct from their daily lives, hence there's no need to change their behavior. They have a perception that global problems do not affect them. But you have activists like Greta Thunberg, right, who see environmental problems as close to them and fights for global problems. Perceived consumer effectiveness. This factor has been found to strongly correlate with the undertaking of sustainable behavior. In many studies, it has been proven that people who feel that they can make a difference are more likely to be environmentally active and consume sustainable products, right? So when you feel that you make a difference, then you become more environmentally active and you consume sustainable products. Relative sustainability. People are frequently confused as how they should behave when the type of behavior are interrelated. Is it sustainable behavior to recycle if you have to use a car to go to the facilities? Steps towards sustainable consumption. Producing environmentally responsible products. The most obvious way for firms to respond to the challenge of sustainable consumption is to develop and market products that impact less harmfully on the environment, right? So environmentally responsible products should be produced. This has been an area of activity for some 25 years and led to the development of vast array of products. Product recapture. Current business systems of production tend to operate on a linear model where products are consumed and disposed of. So circular use of resources not only minimize waste, but also means that less virgin material is needed, right? So in Singapore, there's new water, right, where used water is recycled and used again as a circular use of resources. Service replacement for products. By replacing the sale of the product with an agreement to provide an ongoing service, firms can substantially reduce the amount of material goods being produced, as well as managing certain emissions and energy inputs more effectively, right? So instead of selling a product, so we have a service agreement to provide an ongoing service, right? So for example, the photocopier machine in offices, right? So there's an ongoing service provided to the machines. Product sharing. Products shared by groups of consumers getting more use of the same resources. A way of increasing eco-efficiency, right? Products such as cars. So in Malaysia we have Go Car, right? It's sharing cars. Washing machines, certain tools being found particularly suitable for sharing. Reducing demand. Challenge of sustainability can only be realized if society accepts that people have to buy fewer things, right? This notion might not be popular with businesses. Some consumers or even governments might not be agreeable to this concept, where excessive consumption can even mar consumer enjoyment and threaten businesses, such as in the tourism industry, right? So demand reduction can be particularly pertinent. Next, we look at green jobs, right? So the other side benefits of encouraging sustainable consumption and ensuring environmentally safe products coming to the market is that it will spin off the creation of more green jobs. So green jobs are in industries producing environmentally friendly products such as hybrid cars or solar panels, and services such as recycling or car sharing. the job itself, the workplace, the way labor is organized becomes more environmentally sustainable. There are a number of approaches companies have taken to achieve the goal of a greener workplace. These include incentivizing carpooling, introducing paperless office, substituting business travel with video conferencing like what we're doing now, increasing recycling, moving into low energy use office space are examples of the type of initiatives organizations have explored to green the workplace. Another widely advocated solution is home-based teleworking, right? So rather than commuting to work and adding to road congestion and air pollution, teleworkers are likely to use far fewer resources by staying at home and communicating remotely, right? So the Philippines have unlocked the potential for green jobs, right? So in the Philippines, there are a 10 megawatt solar power plant in the country that can employ 1,000 people for 6 months during its construction. 7 proposed biomass projects, geothermal water developed, right? So this renewable energy can bring jobs as well as cost savings and earnings to the Philippines. Green jobs. Challenges of different labor and environmental standards. Different environmental and health and safety standards in suppliers' countries can provide a loophole to which firms can potentially secure lower cost supplies by bypassing the stringent standards in their country of origin. For example, the recycling of end-of-life electronic waste has increasingly been outsourced to developing countries in Asia and Africa, right? Despite international laws banning the export of hazardous waste to developing countries, combination of spiraling amounts of waste, lax regulation, and a thriving and lucrative informal economy has led to a growing problem of unregulated reprocessing, where the release of lead, mercury, and other dangerous chemicals poses serious threats to human and environmental health, right? So there's a case where EU and South Asia scrap over recycling ships. European effort to bar the use of potentially hazardous ship recyclers in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh has run aground, stalled by an outcry from the South Asian countries. So this is talking about recycling ships in Asian scrapyards. Environmental ethics. Environmental or ecological ethics is a part of environmental philosophy, which considers extending the traditional boundaries of ethics from including humans solely to including non-human world of gifts of nature complementing human lives. The fact that we are part of a larger ecological system has led many writers to insist that we should recognize our moral duty to protect the welfare of humans and non-humans living creatures, not just thinking that the environment should be protected for the sake of human beings, right? So we should also think about the animals that live with us on Earth. Ecological ethics are ethics that claim that the welfare, or at least some non-humans, is intrinsically valuable, and that because of its intrinsic value, humans have a duty to respect and preserve them. The field of environmental ethics concerns human beings' ethical relationship with the natural environment. So this environmental ethics only developed into a specific philosophical discipline in the 1970s. This emergence was no doubt due to the increasing awareness in the 1960s of the effects that technology, industry, economic expansion, and population growth were having on the environment. There's 2 publications in the 1960s. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, first published in 1962, alerted readers to how the widespread use of chemical pesticides was posing a serious threat to public health and leading to the destruction of wildlife. Paul Ehrlich's 1968 book, The Population Bomb, which warned of the devastating effects of the spiraling human population has on the planet's resources. Right. The job of environmental ethics is to outline our moral obligations in the face of such concerns. In a nutshell, the two fundamental questions that environmental ethics must address are: what duties do humans have with respect to the environment, and why? So, environmental ethics relates to how humans use the natural environment as a matter of ethics. Ethical decisions that humans must make with respect to the environment. Should we continue to cut forests and level down hills for the sake of human consumption? So in Malaysia, in the state of Pahang, forests and hills are leveled down for the sake of durian orchards. Is it right for humans to knowingly cause the extinction of a plant or animal species for the convenience of humanity? How do we adjust from our present materialistic lifestyle to a simpler lifestyle to reduce our present consumption? So having sustainable consumption in order to protect the environment as well as preserve resources for the well-being of future generations. It is our duty to recognize and preserve the ecological systems within which we live. Business firms, other social institutions are part of the larger ecological system. Although set up to make profits, they also have a commitment and social responsibility to protect the environment. Business firms depend on the natural environment for energy, material resources, and waste disposal. The environment in turn is affected by the firm's commercial activities. Failure to respect and appreciate the gifts of nature may affect our quality of life, right? So it's about respecting and appreciating gifts of nature. Islam and environmental ethics. Quoting Shomali 2008, Shomali wrote an article, Aspects of Environmental Ethics and Islamic Perspective. In Islam, the environment is sacred and has an intrinsic value. Even if there is no threat or shortage, we must still look after natural resources, protect animals and plants, and more generally improve and develop the environment. As the vice-children of God, we have to channel the mercy of God to everything within our reach. Islam, Surah Al-Hijr, verse 19 till 21, right? And the earth we have spread out and have placed therein firm mountains, and caused to grow therein all kinds of things in due proportion. And we have provided therein means of living, and for those whom you provide not moving living creatures, cattle, beasts, and other animals. And there is not a thing but with us are the stores thereof, and we send it down except in a known measure. So these verses remind the believers that there are limits to utilization of natural resources. Humans are reminded that gifts of nature are not solely ours to be freely exploited, right? So we have gifts of nature, so it's to appreciate and respect and rather than exploit. Even God bestows the resources in proportions, therefore we must also proportionate the use of natural resources to sustain them for our well-being. One of the greatest threats for human society and the environment is extravagance. The origins of these are greed and negligence. Certainly, wasteful consumption is an act of extravagance. This element relates to self-control in fulfilling human desires. While Muslims are taught to have limits in their consumption patterns, they are also taught to benefit from natural resources in a responsible way. So we shall look at elements of the value of water, earth, plants, and animals to humankind from the Islamic perspective. Water is the origin and source of life, based on the Quranic verse 21, Surah 21, verse 30, and we have made water of everything living. And we have made of water everything living. And we send down from the skies water rich in blessings and cause thereby gardens to grow and fields of grains and tall palm trees with their thickly clustered dates as sustenance apportioned to men. Surah 50, verse 9-11. Water is a basic essential resource for Muslims to take ablution before performing prayers. So that's how it's important. Due to its intrinsic value, water must be kept pure and clean for human consumption. The earth. In Islamic scriptures, the earth is an origin for the creation of human beings. From it, the earth, we created you, and into it we shall send you back, and from it we will raise you a second time. Surah 20, verse 55. And the earth has He spread out for all living beings. Surah Ar-Rahman, verse 10. He it is who has made the earth easy to live upon. Go about then in all its regions and partake of the sustenance which He provides. But always bear in mind that unto Him you shall be resurrected. Surah 67, verse 15. And the earth we have spread it wide and set upon it mountains firm, and cause it to bring forth plants of all beauteous kinds, thus offering an insight and a reminder unto every human being who willingly turns unto God, right? Surah 50, verse 7 and 8. Plants. Islam recognizes the value of plants, encourages farming as a noble economic activity of human beings. Planting trees, protecting them are duly encouraged to the extent that planting a tree is considered an act of ibadah, worship. Prophet Muhammad SAW said, unless you are compelled, do not cut down the tree. There are many hadiths that recommend Muslims to plant and do farming. The Prophet Muhammad SAW said, whoever plants a tree and then a human or a creature of God eats its fruit, it will be considered as an act of charity for him. Animals. Animals have numerous rights for which human beings are held responsible. Fundamental rights for animals is the right to life, in addition to food and water, a home and medicine. Animals must be loved and respected. There's a hadith, a woman will be put into hell because she imprisoned a cat until the cat died. But then another hadith of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, whoever kills a sparrow without any reason will be questioned by God on the day of judgment. So we cannot be cruel to animals. So a believer should be moderate in all aspects of life, including his use of natural resources, right? So the best affairs is the medium one, wasatiyah, right? So it's about moderation in our use of natural resources. Humans have been given the responsibility of stewardship and trust by God to care for and serve as a channel for the blessings of God to all His creations. Therefore, mankind must fulfill the requirements of His trust as a vicegerent. We offered the trust unto the heavens and the earth and the hills, but they shrank from bearing it and were afraid of it. But man assumed it, right? So, Surah Al-Ahzab 33, verse 72. That's it from me.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Now we open for Q&A, Doctor.
Right.
I think there is a question in the chat box, Doctor.
Yeah, rapid growth in global population despite low birth rates worldwide. Yeah, birth rates have been falling, but still population is growing. The concern is that we will not have enough natural resources for the whole population. Conspiracy theory on COVID-19: reduce the population, at the same time make a lot of money by capitalists. Right. Technology to harness renewable energies. One of the reasons in the newspaper that I read is about harnessing the uh, in the seas, right? What did we call it? Harnessing power from the sea. Pollution is happening in many Muslim countries. Organic food is expensive. You can grow vegetables almost anywhere, so organic food is not necessary, right? So, right. Organic food is not necessary. So, because you can grow your own food. New water in Singapore is produced out of desperation. Singapore has no natural water resource except the river and sea water. Green jobs are not real. It's just a creation of capitalists to expand their market and making more money. Green jobs. Green jobs appeared in the newspaper, in the Star front page, right? So they are talking about industries producing environmentally friendly products such as hybrid cars, solar panels, services such as recycling, car sharing, right? Those are considered green jobs. International laws is a fuss because the US and Israel and EU do not uphold the laws, right? Only the religious pious person can able to conserve the environment well, and is clearly stated in the holy book of the Quran. Right, that's reflected the beauty of Islam as a universal religion in this world. So the religious pious person can able to conserve the environment well because it's stated in the Quran. The West have destroyed the awareness of environment and so on is being raised by the West because they realize that they have destroyed everything. Deforestation in Pahang, right, due to corruption at every level, right? So deforestation to make way for durian orchards is investigated by the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission. Only the religious pious person can able to conserve the environment as well as clearly stated in the Holy Book. Right. That's the beauty of Islam as a universal religion in this world. Our religion, Islam, talks about conserving the environment, right? The importance of water, earth, plants, and animals. So, according to Shomali, in Islam, the environment is sacred and has an intrinsic value. Even if there is no threat or shortage, we must still look after natural resources, protect animals and plants, and more generally improve and develop the environment. As the vice children of God, we have to channel the mercy of God to everything within our reach. What is the best way to raise awareness of environmental ethics from Islamic perspective in non-Muslim countries? In non-Muslim countries, raise awareness of environmental ethics from Islamic perspective. What is the best way to live our lives as Muslim who care about the environment, recycle and so on, right? So that's the best way to raise awareness of environmental ethics. Reducing demand, but it's difficult to do so. What should we do? One of the ways is to have a minimalist lifestyle, right? So not go with minimalism. Right. Hydro energy, yeah, that's the power of the seas being harnessed. Do you think it's worth implementing environmental ethics from some perspective in nowadays that we are surrounded by capitalism behavior? Is it worth? It's worth to care for the environment, right? So no matter that the capitalist behavior is around us, but if we care for the environment enough, the behavior around us will change. Right. But as Hannah mentioned, the best way to raise awareness of environmental ethics is through interfaith dialogue, scholarly publication, and so on. Right? If non-human welfare has intrinsic value, how should a business If non-human welfare has intrinsic value, how should a business, for example, a real estate developer, approach a project that requires clearing a natural habitat, even if it brings significant economic benefits to humans, right? So that's a question that environmental ethics comes up with, right? Real estate developer approaching a project that requires clearing a natural habitat. So it brings significant benefits to humans, but what about to non-human beings, right? So that's one of the issues nowadays of wildlife, animals, right? Especially in Malaysia, in the Greek jelly, right, is encroaching on human development, right? It's more like us encroaching on their wildlife habitat. Right, thank you to the moderator.
Thank you.